Let's go through this. You guys talk me through all the steps, please. So what are we doing first?
Add 1.
Adding 1. Okay. So step 1. Okay. Equals 1. Now what?
Now you divide by 3.
Divide by 3. Okay. We can just do that to abbreviate that step, right? So that's going to give us, if we do that, we're going to get x squared minus x equals 1/3. How come it's so important to leave a space there?
You gotta add.
Okay, good. Because I have to complete the square, right? I got to complete the square with those two terms. So what am I going to add to both sides? Well, what's
squared?
Negative 1/2 squared. I'm going to add half of b squared, right? So half of b squared. What is half of b again? Negative 1/2. What is negative 1/2 squared? Okay, good. So in other words, these two things are equal then, right? Okay. So what does that mean this is going to factor into on the left? This perfect square trinomial is going to factor into what? Okay, that's why we want to write it that way, right? We want to write it as b over 2 squared because then whatever's inside goes right there, right? It's easy to factor. Then we have to think about it. On the other side, we're going to get 1/3 plus 1/4. Well, that's 1/3 is how many twelfths? 4. Okay, 4 twelfths, agreed? Multiply top and bottom by 4. Plus 1/4 is how many twelfths? 3 twelfths, which is 7 twelfths, right? Okay, now what? Square root, right? Now we completed the square. So at this point right here, we're done completing the square. Right? So now all we have to do from this point forward is we just have to isolate, right? Now we're just solving an equation. So we're going to isolate x, and that we do that by square rooting both sides. Right? And that's going to give us x minus 1/2 equals plus or minus. And then I have to simplify the square root of 7 over the square root of 12, right? So that's going to be square root of 7 over, what does the square root of 12 simplify to? 2 square root of 3. Okay, I've got to simplify that though. You know, 10's in the basement, so what do? Okay, good. And so we get x minus 1/2 equals plus or minus square root of 21 over 6. Okay, and then last step. Where's the 1/2 go? Right there, good. So we get x equals 1/2 plus or minus square root of 21 over 6. All right, give me 1 to 5. How we doing? Okay. Okay. All right, do you want to try that one on your own? That's on the board? Yeah. Okay, that's a tough one. It's a toughie.
Come on, smell it. It's a tough. You can do this.
I know you can, but it's a tough one, I'm telling you.
4r squared minus 7r equals negative 9. Are you doing it on the desk?
Okay, step number 1.
Divide by 4.
We got to divide by a, right? We got to divide by 4. So when we do that, we're able to skip that step. We divide everything through by 4, and that's going to give us r squared minus 7/4 r equals negative 9/4, right? Okay, good. Now what? What do we have to complete the square? What am I adding to both sides? What am I squaring? Make sure you get the sign right.
You're squaring negative 7/8.
Good. Half of negative 7/4, which is going to give me negative 7/8 quantity squared. Well, what is negative 7/8 squared?
49.
Oops, why did I put 46?
49.
Okay, and then so when we factor the perfect square trinomial, what am I combining with my variable? Right, half of b. So I get r minus 7/8 quantity squared equals that. And you guys did the math. If I multiplied this by 16 over 16, I get negative 144 64ths plus 49 64ths is negative 95 64ths, right? Okay, so I square root both sides. And that's going to give me r minus 7/8 equals plus or minus square root of that, right? So on the bottom, I'm getting an 8. On the top, what's the square root of negative 95 simplified? Okay, yeah, square root of 95i. Last step, add the 7/8, and we got it. 7/8 plus or minus square root of 95/8 I. Okay, last one I want to do with you together here. So this one, slightly different context. It says rewrite the equation in vertex form. Okay, so if I'm going to rewrite the equation in vertex form, we all know what vertex form is. Remind me really quick, humor me, what's vertex form? Y equals? There you go. Okay, so to get there, we're just going to complete the square. Now, the only difference is, instead of rewriting this as ax squared plus bx equals c, what we're going to do is we're going to leave the y on the other side. So we're always going to have a y plus on the other side, right? So we're going to push everything over to the left side. So this step's really getting kind of modified. It's really not, in fact, I'm just going to get rid of all those instructions because they don't really apply here, do they? They're a little bit different. So let's do this. Okay. So we're going to subtract the 5 to the other side, and we'd get y minus 5 equals 4x squared minus 7x. Now what? Well, what do we have to do to complete the square on the right side?
Oh, we gotta add half of it.
Okay, but we're not there yet.
Divide.
We got to divide by 4, right? We need to have, this has to be in the form x squared plus bx, right? So we got a 4x squared. We got to divide both sides through by 4. Okay, so what's that going to give us? On the left side, we're going to get y minus 5 over 4. Okay, on the right side, we're going to get x squared minus 7/4 x, right? Okay, this is the form we need, right? Because this is now, that looks like, whoops, that looks like x squared plus bx, doesn't it? Right, that's what we needed. So to complete the square, what are we going to add to both sides? Well, on this side, I'm gonna write it as something squared. What's it gonna be, Jojo? Say it again. Yeah, negative 7/8. Yeah, good. So negative 7/8 quantity squared, which is the same thing as 49/64. That looks pretty familiar. That's what we just did, right? Okay, good. So what does the right side factor into then? Right, and that's because, look, that number right there goes right there. Okay. On the other side, do we need to simplify this? No, you don't. You could, but you don't have to, because now what we're going to do, we've completed the square. Now we're just going to need to re-isolate the y. We're just going to undo all the steps we just did to get the y by itself, right? So what are we stuck with at this point? We've got y minus 5 over 4 plus 49/64. Okay, to isolate that y, what's the first thing I've got to do? I've got to, well, subtract 49/64, right? Okay, so we'll do that. We subtract. So those guys cancel, and we get y minus 5 over 4 equals the quantity x minus 7/8 squared minus 49/64. Now what? Multiply by 4. Right. Okay, good. We got to multiply by 4. So we'll distribute a 4 all the way through. Well, that's going to cancel the 4 in the denominator here, right? So we're going to get y minus 5 equals, here I'm going to get a 4 in front of my perfect square, right? That's going to look like an A, so I'm going to get 4 times x minus 7/8 squared. And then finally, if I multiply there, well, I'm multiplying 4 over 1, right? It's like I'm multiplying this guy times 4 over 1, so I could reduce. That just gives me a 16 on the bottom, right? 4 over 64 is the same as 1 over 16. So I've got minus 49 over 16. Last step, add 5. That's it, add 5, right? So if we add 5, those guys cancel. I isolated my y, and I got my answer. I got y equals 4 times the quantity x minus 7/8 squared. And then here I'm going to have to multiply by each top and bottom by 16. So I'm going to get 80 over 16. Negative 49/16 plus 80/16 is 31/16. And we're done. Okay, where's the vertex? There's the vertex. Does it open up or down? Up. It's vertically stretched by a factor of 4. How about that? We got it. Okay, give me thumbs on that. Does that make sense? Okay, you can work.